All right, Blake, the big question for today. Do I need an MSP, an outsourced IT company, or an IT director?
Yes, I think this can be subtitled, Should I Build or Buy an IT Department?
There we go. Let's get the camera straight here. Get the taxidermy. For the background is the presenter.
Perfect.
We'll have to get a trundle up goat, trundle up ram. All right, so your dynamic duo for today. I'm Mr. Ian MacRae, founder of Ian Computers, way back in the 90s. Oh, 23 plus years of experience. Blake, what happened to me?
Well, I'm gonna have to change that to 24 soon, I
think. Oh, it's getting worse. At what point do you stop putting the years of experience? I like these. Have you ever seen those companies? It's like, we have 150 years of combined experience in plumbing,
Right, well, if we combined all the experience everyone has on the team, we would be in the triple digits, I think. So
that's right. Well, Blake, I like your 10 years of IT experience. That's
a nice round number.
Seems like, it's a good amount. All right, so our presentation today is about why we buy IT talent and all the different ways we buy it. So Blake, you've been part of a big enterprise IT department. Tell me a little bit about your org chart, where you worked in enterprise IT.
So this org chart looks complicated to you. Wait till you get into the 15, 20,000 user range, which we were dealing with. That the org chart looked like, it looked like a fractal. One of those, it keeps branching off into smaller and smaller pieces. For instance, we had network engineering, we had people that just did edge switching, we had people that did routers, we had a team that did nothing but storage, SAN management. We used two different virtualization technologies, so we had two different virtualization teams. We had a Hyper-V team and a VMware team. Yeah, when you're dealing with that many people, we got specialties on top of specialties.
Yeah, you're all just talking about the infrastructure manager vertical. That's reporting to the CTO.
Yep, I haven't even gotten into the information management. We had a whole team that did nothing but try to figure out how Microsoft was trying to scam us with licensing. That was 4 or 5 people just on that team.
That's in administration, the column over. Mm-hmm. the financial and licensing.
Yeah, that was several full-time jobs. And then not even getting into developers, which I didn't even touch, but we had quite a few in-house line of business apps and other things that we had teams on top of teams just managing that.
Yep. So you basically, whether we're hiring people or hiring vendors, they're going to fall into some of these hats. Mm-hmm. And usually we're so small that, you're going to hire one IT infrastructure engineer and he's going to have to master VMware as well as Hyper-V. If you're using both of those platforms, he's going to have to master your SAN, or he's going to have to hire somebody that is a master of the SAN. Mm-hmm. So he's then going to be, the vendor manager. And usually we're going to hire a software company instead of, buying custom writing a line of business app. Mm-hmm. And we're just gonna risk it with Microsoft that they don't come calling. We're not going to put anyone on that job, right?
Yeah, exactly. When you're in a smaller environment, this org chart is going to be 1 or 2 boxes probably.
That's right. So I guess one thing, just kind of at a strategic level here, maybe we could clarify on the org chart a little bit, but really we've got a breakout here of the Chief Information Officer, the CIO, and the Chief Technology Officer, the CTO. Mm-hmm. What are your thoughts, Blake, between like platform selection, the technology piece, and information management, like, and how that's kind of reports up.
Well, I think a lot of people will tell you those are the same thing. It's just you're paying two people for the same job, but in reality, it is two different disciplines. It's two different ways of thinking, really. The way we talked about it a little while ago is kind of like when you're buying a car. There's only so many cars you can buy, and so that's what the CTO would handle. Is going to handle the physical aspect of putting you in a car, buying your sand, choosing a virtualization technology. But the CIO is going to be in charge of what goes in it. So if you're buying a car, you may want to buy a chauffeur. You're going to hire somebody to drive you around in the car, and that's going to be something real specialized. You're going to want to. I know people that people pay their chauffeurs oodles and oodles of money because they like them. They know the roads, they know their schedule, they've got that dialed in. It doesn't matter what car they're in, but that person knows the local circumstances, and they know how to take advantage of them. And so that's kind of where CIO and CTO breaks down.
Right. So the CIO is really looking to make sure that we're collecting the right data, reporting the right data to management, dealing with maybe data governance issues. Do we need to keep our data for 7 years, or purge our data after 2 years, or do we have health records, other things, which is a pretty different conversation versus, do we do Hyper-V or do we do VMware with our virtualization technology, or do we go Gmail, or do we go Office 365? That's kind of more the realm of the CTO.
Mm-hmm.
Well, again, it all just starts with these business needs. So we're talking about today whether we, hire IT talent or buy IT talent. So, obviously, hiring dedicated staff is one of the most popular ways of doing it. But, I'd be in a lot of smaller businesses, and it also happens in bigger ones. In bigger ones, it's more of a shadow IT, but you have employees that have IT responsibilities. Was shadow IT an issue in your enterprise, Blake?
Yeah, it was. We actually did have dedicated job roles within each department that kind of were the interface with the IT team, which was nice. But depending on who they were, they could be totally non-technical, or they could be too technical for their own good, and set up shadow IT stuff without really consulting the IT department for strategy.
And I guess the IT department finds out about it usually when there's a phone call saying, I can't get my files back, and the IT department says, what files? And then you find out that somebody, set files in Dropbox and didn't tell anyone about it, and they quit, and the Dropbox stopped working. And
yeah, I can't get into Slack. I don't remember Slack being an approved tool for anywhere in this organization. So, okay, yeah, stuff like that was fairly common.
Now, I've seen it also occur in other ways where I worked with a very successful company, and they really had a great discipline around documentation. And basically, they had some very confusing and unreliable IT systems, but they just documented the heck out of them. Mm-hmm. And basically, the line workers, in the production facility, they would have these documented manuals of, reboot the computer 3 times. And it's like, well, it's supposed to work that way. That's the way we documented it. So I've also seen that happen. So it can get pretty interesting with assigning IT responsibility to non-technical employees. But it can also happen in good ways. I've seen quality engineers, or people, especially in the engineering type fields, manufacturing type fields, where you'll take people and they might start out in that type of field, and then they get mentored into being IT as their specialty. So they lose those other QC responsibilities, or CAD design responsibilities, and they just become the IT person full time.
Mhm.
And that can be fairly nice, but it can be a pretty slow career path transition from, from being the QC engineer to being the IT director. But I do see that happen organically in organizations. So that kind of covers the employee hiring, how we fill out that org chart that we were looking at previously. But we also hire vendors, and we hire them through a lot of different ways. What you've also worked, Blake, as in vendor environments. What different ways have you seen people hiring?
Well, when I worked for an MSP, it was kind of it's all over the place. It was kind of like, in some places would only call us when something broke. They'd only call us to buy new hardware. Other cases, it was we were doing everything for them. We were their help desk and manage their infrastructure and manage their backups and everything else. It was really, it really depended on the business, how much support they wanted from us.
Right. Whether it's more of usually typically a fixed fee managed service, or some sort of a hybrid of, hey, we just manage the backup, and then all this other stuff is hourly or retainer. And then there's cloud. If usually when people get really frustrated with their IT, they go cloud.
Mm-hmm. And then you can just have no support, and files are at the mercy of Google or Microsoft or whoever, and hope nobody has a bad day and deletes them.
Are you frustrated because of the Gmail outage this week, Blake? Is that what you're saying? So the first thing that I want to really point out is whether you're thinking about hiring a vendor or hiring an employee or a mentoring employee into an IT role. Let's first start with working on the job description, and I'm going to show you some ways of thinking about the job description that you're writing. So that's going to be the real thrust here, is to just always start with the job description here. And as we're thinking about the job description, think about the career path. Is this a job that somebody really wants to have? And how mixing unrelated skills and duties, mixing high value tasks with low value tasks, just like in any other job role, can really impact the employee morale.
Mm-hmm.
Blake, you can be honest. Do I sometimes mix duties when I give to you, and you're like, darn it, Ian, if you could just take this away from me.
Yeah, I mean, it happens in every job role. I fought with it a lot. My last one too, where it's like, you can, yes, I can do that, but for what else I could be working on, or for the amount you're paying me, there's other ways of doing this. It's common across probably every job, but in IT it can get really crazy sometimes.
So are you saying that when I emailed you that list to do some data entry on yesterday, that that those job offers that were scrolling up in your LinkedIn feed started becoming a little more attractive?
Comment on that, but
so I guess role in hiring a vendor. I guess a lot of it, value for money is a big one, but people also say, well, what about liability? What about intellectual property loss? I'm doing a lot of sensitive things with my IT, and I may not want to tell you all about them, or I risk losing control of them once I tell you about them, that I will have no way of sort of pulling that back in. Mm-hmm. Which I think is, there's certainly some valid concerns there. We see some folks where their IT is very integrated into their business. Maybe they're running e-commerce or online banking, or something where their IT is sort of front and center facing, and IT vendors can really, screw up the business process. So these are very, very legitimate concerns.
Mhm.
So I want to talk a little bit about my my theory of IT need. So, I think when we're starting to think about a job role, I think it's good to think about hand-holding versus enablement when supporting users. When supporting operations, I think it's good to think about labor intensive versus volume intensive. Like, hey, we have a lot of employee turnover. That's volume intensive. It might be a sign of problems elsewhere in the business, but it might not be IT's problem. And then with projects, maintenance projects versus growth projects. So I'm just going to walk through some scenarios here, and then we can kind of wrap up with looking at some job descriptions.
Sounds good.
So my first leg of the three-legged stool is people support. So here's some hand-holding scenarios and some enablement scenarios. So I think that IT can be a huge enabler for the business. Like we talked about with integrating IT into the business process, like e-commerce or online banking. I mean, if IT is that enabled into the business where you're not just supporting the 20 employees of the business, but you're supporting those 100 customers,
Mhm.
and you're so tightly integrated with your customers that they're working off of your systems. I mean, that's just a huge deal changer.
Mhm. You're going to have a larger IT team because just to support that, there's no way around that.
When you were in enterprise, did your enterprise have any sort of like taking direct payments or donations directly from from you could say the stakeholders? Did you guys have any things like that where you were tightly integrated?
Yeah, for sure. We had some external facing things that did require frontline people, a number of frontline people to take care of those issues and support people.
And ultimately, you'd want to have those types of systems. You're directly working with your stakeholders, your customers, and you're collecting new data about them. And then you're taking that data and putting it into management reporting. I mean, this is essentially Google and Facebook's business model. They're just constantly collecting more and more data about everyone, and they just get better and better at serving everyone. But it doesn't just have to be a company like that. I mean, you have real estate firms or insurance companies doing that at levels big and small.
Mhm.
You go and you go to a real estate firm and you tell your realtor you're looking for a 3-bedroom house, and that's something that they can then use to better serve that prospect. So it could happen at all different sizes of companies. So I think that those are really empowering things. Now, you've been around IT for a long time. Have you ever seen some of the negatives here?
Yeah, for sure. All of them, and then some.
So one of my favorite is bridging the gap with difficult vendors. We'll see some of those coming forward in these job descriptions.
Mhm.
So the second theory of IT need is IT operations support. So volume intensive. Some of these volume intensive ones could be red flags for the business, but not necessarily. Let's face it. If IT has just got their fingers in everything, that can be fairly labor intensive. We work with manufacturers where IT is, printing labels that are going right on the end product, maintaining complex controls. What other, fairly intensive things have you seen, Blake, with just integrating IT?
I mean, it's just when you get to a certain number of people to support, it's just going to be more work. So you're going to need more people to support them. I forget what our ratio was, but it was like one IT person for every 30 users or something we supported. It's fairly high. Of course, those were specialized, but yeah, there's just lots of things that even with automation and with with good design, it's still just work to maintain those systems and support them.
Right. So I've seen, medical offices where, the patients are hooked up to vital monitors that are on the network, X-ray systems that are on the network. It could be, trucking companies where the truckers are all, running a computer in the cab. Some of those computers in the cab might even be monitoring the load, like if they have a fuel load, or they could have a dash cam that's also recording their trips for insurance reasons. I mean, there's all of that type of stuff where, maybe you're not just dealing with the 100 employees, but you're dealing with 3, 4, 5 different systems that, like you're saying, Blake, that all of those 100 employees are using. And some of those systems are hardware systems that require, some level of hands-on support.
Mm-hmm.
There's just, sometimes that just exponential complexity does start getting away from you.
Yeah.
But I think on the other side of things, the lack of remote support tools, we see IT departments where they don't have full support. They don't have standards. They're supporting multiple systems for no reason other than, this manager just wants to run this system and doesn't want to give in and learn the other system.
Yeah.
But also lack of IT automation. I mean, I think often IT, it's kind of that red stapler complex from Office Space, the guy in the basement who's holding on to his red stapler. And they really struggle to have a voice to management around empowerment around their own department and their own tools, and how that can really help them.
Mm-hmm.
So the last part of the theory of IT need is projects. And gosh, I mean, I love projects that are really putting an impact to the bottom line. Have you seen some of those projects over the years, Blake?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, anytime when you have like you have some mentioned here, like growth, when you have business goals that are built around new locations or new initiatives, there's just going to be more IT projects to work on.
Yeah. Like, we're having sometimes it can be seasonality, or, we're supporting big events, mergers and acquisitions. That's always fun. We're going to integrate in this new, 100-person organization into our platform, and we've got to flip them overnight to our phone system or whatever. Some companies are doing that pretty regularly.
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 times a year, they're acquiring a new business.
Yeah.
But oftentimes I see that it's, maintenance projects. We're going from Windows 7 to Windows 10, or we're going from our Exchange server to Office 365. We're not really looking to get anything new done here. It's just that we have the old one. It's worn out. It's no longer supported. We got to get the new one.
Mm-hmm.
And, the IT department is looking to get those types of things done.
Yeah.
So one interesting thing, we talked about the risk with liability earlier, but if you're dealing with maintenance projects and you're trying to do those types of things in-house, maybe even the regulatory compliance controls, and you're getting your in-house IT team to do that, and they've never done that stuff before. This is their first time. They were Windows 7 experts. Now they're having to go to Windows 10. They were Exchange Server experts. Now they're going to Office 365. They're meeting CMMC controls. They're doing that for the first time. Like, you're an employee. If I ask you to do something for the first time, and you screw it up, is that on me or is that on you?
It's on you.
It's on me. And if you screw it up, do I get to sue you?
No.
Because I'm the one who asked you to do it. Are you maintaining any professional liability insurance for me? When you screw that up, if I ask you to implement some new software you've never done before, are you maintaining any insurance that I can go after?
No.
No. So now with a vendor, if you ask them to do something that they say they're experts in, is that liability equation a little different? I mean, most vendors, they actually have to be expert. They've actually done this stuff before. They're actually maintaining insurance. So it's a pretty different scenario going from an internal employee to an external vendor.
Yeah.
So let's dive into some of these job descriptions here. And I've just highlighted, going back to red being kind of something to flag to consider concern, and green being something potentially good. I'm just flagging some of these job descriptions. So here's one I really liked. The IT manager at a 250 person plumbing shop. So did anything jump out at you here with this one, Blake?
There's a lot of stuff happening here. And for a lot of different systems. I mean, things that we had, like I said, in the larger enterprise had specialized for days, but yeah, it's just kind of all over the place with the roles here.
Yeah, but I mean, it's mostly focused on infrastructure and user support. So I thought it was a little easier with some of the role sharing than some of the other ones, but yeah, you're absolutely right with that. One thing that was sort of a red flag that kind of caught me right off the bat was in talking with these folks, there wasn't full remote support available. So you're supporting 250 devices, but you don't have a way of necessarily remoting into all of them. You're doing it across 4 different offices. So travel is a part of that. And the next thing that kind of was a red flag in learning about this position was this company has an IT vendor. They have a cloud IT vendor that you would think would be doing some of this user support and some of this work. So, that puts a big question mark out here. So are we spending another $46,000 a year to basically, enter tickets into the vendor's system and just provide sort of the hand holding for some of the end devices because we don't have direct remote support into them. The next thing is we're supporting quite a mix of different things. The cell phones, iPads and Chromebooks, essentially the same purpose, but 2 different platforms there, as well as laptops and thin clients. So again, laptops and thin clients, the same sort of purpose, but 2 different platforms. So that looked like some opportunities to maybe consolidate. I also was surprised, we've got this cloud vendor, but we're still managing backups. So it would seem like where does the vendor step in? Why isn't that automated more? So I see a number of concerns here. If I was the hiring manager or the business manager here, I would see a number of concerns here that we might just be kind of doubling down on the status quo with missing some opportunities. I did see some things that I really liked. I saw that this person was fairly focused on supporting the users. This is a pretty big outfit, 250 people. So there's only so much automation you can do. Although there are some systems that can automate, if you're setting up your user groups correctly, you can automatically add people into distribution groups and that kind of thing pretty easily. So my guess is there might be some room to make the job easier. I also like that they were using a customer portal. So, maybe the customers are logging some of their tickets or managing their bills or that kind of stuff. That I saw that was strong. So there were some things here I really liked as well, including that they're using cameras that are on their network. So that better supports the business than sort of having a VHS tape somewhere. Don't see a lot of that, but we do sometimes see the DVRs that are off network.
I mean, it's hard to say here. This could be doesn't really specify the camera vendor, so you could be managing the padlock on the front of the VHS recorder.
Oh, okay. Have some hope, Blake. So, when we consult with companies that are looking to hire, we help them, think through these things and see if automation, could play a role. And if automation was in place here, could this person be doing more with maybe data strategy, IT strategy? So maybe they could wear another hat if they had some of the, if automation was picking up in some of these areas that we've highlighted red, or if their vendors were picking up, maybe this person could be a more strategic hire or more of a coach and a mentor to employees to better use their systems.
Yeah, it looks like they have a pretty wired operation here. If they have, iPads they're handing out to employees and stuff. Like, it sounds like they have a lot of technology in use in their business, but might not be as easy to manage as they were hoping.
Yeah. Now, also when I look at these job roles, I see them often in two different ways. It seems like you were saying, Blake, that there's all these different job roles, all these different platforms, and we're looking for this unicorn person that's going to be an expert in all of them. Or IT has really gotten the support of leadership, and we've got some IT department bloat. And oftentimes when we get more people in the department, our hardware budgets go out the window because the organization can only support so much. So then we start getting these really weird, like, hey, we need to hire a guy because we have this open source system that's really labor intensive to support. So it's like we went from having the Maytag repair guy because we hired, we're like a 50-person organization, but we have a dedicated network engineer. And because we're spending all this money on the network engineer, he has built this really weird system that now has to be maintained. So we went from, like one extreme to the other. Do you see that sometimes, Blake? You've been in IT departments where they use some open source stuff.
Oh yeah. I mean, we had some very scarily smart guys that worked for us, guys and girls. And it was hard to keep them from reinventing the wheel sometimes, because you'd say, we can spend X amount on this solution and it'll work out of the box and it'll be great. And, sometimes they lean back and go, or, we could do it with this, and this open source package. And I can whip that up over the weekend and it'll be fun. And, it's hard to look at the TCO of that when you're, like you said, you're already paying their salary. So it seems like it's free, in the beginning, especially to management that's looking at the numbers.
Yeah, until you realize that it's often free until that unicorn person that you've now, you've gone from Maytag to unicorn. Now you have this really specialized system, or scaling that. I've seen some where maybe it worked well when the business was 10 people, but now that it's 50, it's like, holy crud, yeah. So here's a nice unicorn one. IT manager at a 60-person chemical plant. So we got 4 different roles here. I really like the roles. All 4 roles seem to be kind of spot on, except, the vendor management. In talking with these folks, they also have a full, fairly engaged IT vendor. So it's kind of like, why are you paying for this twice? Shouldn't the vendor be monitoring incapacity planning for you if you have them? But yeah, so I mean, but the job description is pretty strong here, but it's 4 different job descriptions. But then I think where this gets really, kind of unicorny here, the horn starts really growing. I mean, this is a chemical plant. This is not. I mean, a chemical plant's kind of a unicorn. I mean, Blake, you went to school for IT. You have some certifications. I mean, did you get any training around chemical plant IT?
Not that I remember. It's been a few.
Are you saying you were on chemicals when they gave you that training?
I cut my teeth in a very low risk environment. So, supporting IT at a school is kind of like, works most of the time. So, when you get into I understand what you're saying, when you get into a life safety kind of environment, it's just a different ball game. Yeah.
So you've got to have a bachelor's degree. You got to have 5 years of experience, but heaven against specializing. You've been in IT for 5 years, but you haven't specialized, because we're going to be asking you to do 4 different distinct roles. Okay. So you need to be experienced, but a jack of all trades. Plus you have to know all of our systems. So, we have a special stack here at ABC Chemicals, and we need you to have in-depth knowledge of VMware, Cisco, UCS, EMC storage, Cisco VoIP. I mean, if you've been on some other platform, heaven forbid, the list goes on, and have experience in our API manufacturing environment. So, I mean, I hope they're going to pay this guy $150,000 a year, because this is
I was thinking more like 200,000 a year, but yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and you have to know our regulatory compliance. I mean, so we need you to forecast for us. We need you to do security. We need you to do engineering and like compliance officer.
And you need to have done all this stuff for 5 years.
Yeah.
And some other job that's not paying you $150,000 a year.
So I mean, I love personally talking about IT and coming up with, I can do the some of the compliance type roles. I can do the forecasting, but I've specialized in that. So I'm a terrible engineer. I did that in my previous life. So if any of my engineering skills now are 10 years old, because I've specialized in all of those other things.
Sure.
And it's usually, you're either going to find somebody who's great at those things, or, terrible at the engineering roles. And anymore, it seems like, security is a whole different skill set than, engineering. So
not even get into that, but yeah, it's yeah.
So I think here's the other end of the spectrum. We've got a nonprofit, it's a library here, and somehow they've gotten themselves into the hosting business. How did that happen? Oh, Linux. That's right. I could get some free. I could start doing some hosting. I could just spin up a server.
I mean, I'm having flashbacks to the 90s here, IIS, IIS 6 or whatever, like go to the library's website, you get that IIS error page, and you're like, this is just running on some server under the circulation desk somewhere. Like,
yeah, I mean, so this library's got a side Linux hosting business. I mean, you could hire this guy for $48K a year, or you could get I don't know, 10 GoDaddy accounts. Oh, and support 30 computers.
oh yeah, 30 computer lab computers.
Yeah, I mean there's a computer lab and a Linux server someplace. I'm just saying, it was a little bored one day, and we didn't have anything to do, so we started offering some hosting services. Yeah. So what I like about this is that there is also a volume thing here. So there's nights and weekends. There's retail type hours. So I can see that adding some burden to IT. So while you're working the nights and weekends, you start downloading some free Apache web hosting, and you're off to the races.
Yeah, that's wild.
I didn't want to provide the screenshot of their website. I'm just saying, when you're building websites on the side, it doesn't look pretty either. You would have been better with the $500 Wix account. Oh boy. All right, so you've got an IT admin for 80-person logistics company. So in talking with these people, what was interesting is that that they really, they were really looking to maintain the status quo. There wasn't any growth or acquisition plans here. So there's a lot of things here where they do have a pretty complex setup. It's again another 250 point, endpoint type or node network. But there's really no plans to build this out. So it's just, going from one generation to the next.
It looks like they might have some specialized stuff with they have like in-cab monitoring or something on their trucks.
Yeah, they have some integration into hardware like that, where there's definitely more going on here than just a standard 80-person shop.
Sure.
To get them up to that 250 endpoints. But it's a lot of this is just fear of having to go from one generation to the next. And then you've really got to ask yourself, is the internal IT person going to really have that skill set to go from one generation to the next, or are they going to have to really hire a vendor to do that? So we shouldn't be hiring an engineer. We should be hiring more of a vendor manager.
Right. I mean, if you have a specialized system like that, you might have somebody in-house to manage it, because it's core, like you're saying, it's core to your business, and it's there's going to be some overhead with that. But then the rest of it, do you want to roll in all of these other roles in there and these one-off projects into those duties? It seems like a good idea from a budget standpoint, but from a strategy standpoint, it's not going to work that well.
Right. So here we have a software application specialist. I like this one because it really seemed to be supporting automation in the business. But in talking to these folks, there's also a pretty big element of also just kind of keeping the IT vendor on the rails. Look, we're going to have to maintain a ticketing system. I guess the IT vendor's not so responsive on the phones. But I really like the, ensuring the managers have the reporting that they need and updating the dashboards. So, I think there's some good strengths and weaknesses here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it seems like this would be more of like a business analyst kind of role.
Yeah.
But it also managed IT guy stuff on the way.
Yeah. I think, as we work with them to have some better, have some better trust in the IT support vendor to actually see issues through to resolution.
Mhm.
Then the business analyst can really focus on their core job.
Yeah.
Now here's one with, I really had some fun with. And helping these folks really chart a career path. I mean, look at where we started out here. We have an IT person that is also responsible for main office petty cash. Wait a minute, what's going on here?
Mhm.
We have, reviewing accounts receivable, coding. I mean, we got some really, selling stuff on eBay. I mean, we've got just this real medley of other duties as assigned, which really feels like, it feels like we would be better off with either, working with these folks, helping them find either a part-time IT person that just gets to, focus on IT, or they have again, a vendor here, which really is not stepping up in some of these areas. So, why isn't the vendor getting the troubleshooting of the local and wide area networks, across the finish line? So there's some underlying problems here with the, look, ensuring stability and high-speed connections to agency sites. I mean, why haven't we just haven't bought reliable systems? So we have a person that's, essentially having to reboot routers and that kind of stuff to keep the agency up and going.
Yeah. This feels like an organic kind of thing. Like this is very, we had an office manager that was doing all these things and she left, and now we're stuck with trying to fill that role because she was doing literally everything that we asked her to. And then she's like moved on to another role, and then you have to try to find a unicorn.
Yeah. So, I mean, basically, with my theory of IT need here, there's certainly, I think, a role for consultants and vendors in enablement, volume intense work, growth. I mean, consultants and vendors can, have experience with growth projects, have expertise with helping your people, in enablement, be able to automate, high volume tasks such as new user provisioning. There's certainly an area in those areas, but if you look at these things and if you think about it critically and think about the hand holding or the labor intensive things or the maintenance projects, I mean, those are the slam dunk areas where, if we can do a one and done project, or if we can use automation, going the consulting or the outsourced route could really be powerful, because a lot of these are one and done things. In other words, if you're this nonprofit, we have a one-time project to get our systems working reliably between the offices, and finding the right IT vendor. And then we don't have to have the hand holding. We don't have to have the labor intensive, maintenance. A lot of these folks, if we could just get this one, project, get up and over the hump with this one project, our IT would be so much better off.
Yeah.
And we wouldn't have to hire some of these things. We could just hire a clerical person to look after things instead of this, hybrid role.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, concerns around outsourcing, these are some of the big ones. We talked about some of it before. Whenever you outsource, at least when we're working with people, we really have to document what's going on. So I feel like whenever you're working with a responsible vendor and they're documenting things, you actually have much better outcomes when it comes to knowing what's going on than with an employee. Like, I know you've helped us with some of our documents with our process, and you're pretty process driven, but I know as an employee, there's no obligation for you to document your processes. You're only going to do that if I ask you, or if you take initiative to do it.
Sure. Yeah. We always ask, what happens if I get hit by a bus?
Right.
My last job was, people, a team that big, we always had turnover. So we just focused on documentation of, making sure if you had to hand this to somebody tomorrow, well, would you be ready to do that? Is the documentation in place for someone to pick up where you left off?
So I think if you're going either the hourly model or the fixed fee model, there should be more documentation than necessarily with an internal employee. Mm-hmm. Certainly, if you're going the fixed fee model, there should be a fair bit of care going into the initial scope of work. And a fixed fee model lends itself more to a team approach, which would allow for more documentation. Oftentimes with the hourly model, the documentation is seen as an extra cost, which, we don't have approval for.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, we're only going to do things that we get a direct call saying, hey, fix this for me. So usually people don't call up and say, hey, document for me, with some of the bigger documentation things that have to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I guess there's some value for money pieces with either of these, especially going back to sort of my needs theory. If there's, just labor intensive tasks like, hey, I have a lot of employee turnover, I've got 250 employees and there's 100 new employees a year. I should just hire somebody. If I've got somebody, working a lot with employee onboarding and turnover, I'm not going to want to pay hourly for that task and a $15 an hour task, pay $100 an hour, outside contractor fee. With managed services, it's also value for money, but it tends to be around the fixed fee mm-hmm. model. And is that fixed fee scope of work, right for my business? Have you ever been working with an IT company and you've seen, the hourly model become an obstacle?
Yeah, for sure. It's the last MSP I worked at. This was 10 years ago, but it was always kind of a question hanging over your head, even as a tech, is like, how long is this going to take me, and is the client going to want to pay for it? I know what I should do, but it ultimately comes down to a race against the clock. Yeah,
and it's not. It's. I also see it with our customers. When we used to offer hourly support as our primary model, that often there'd be a lot of hesitation with people to call. So they would know that something was wrong, but they wouldn't feel empowered to call and sort of raise that red flag. Often until something else was wrong or some other project was started, and then you'd get, sort of pinned down with 2 or 3 issues once the clock was ticking. So it was always a surprise.
Yeah.
So the next thing is, I think, the tools conundrum here. Now, Blake, in your experience with IT, have you ever showed up at a customer site and you've felt like you've been given the hammer to nail in the screw?
Oh yeah, for sure.
It's like, here, can you use our backup tool? Yeah, it's not exactly the tool that you would use, but it's the one we already have.
I could use that tool, but no. The backup tools are the tip of the iceberg there, but they're very divisive in the IT world, I know. they either work or they don't. So if it's one of those things where you need to have the right tool and it needs, you know how to use it, because when the need comes, you need it. You really need it.
Exactly. So another thing that people often ask, so here you have an example of a skydiver. I know that there's a local skydiving outfit, and for 150 bucks you can go skydiving. But if I was looking at their statement of work, kind of the way some of our prospects do, I would see, I get in the plane, I put on the parachute, I would see those aspects of their statement of work, and I would say, oh, well, I don't want to pay for that plane.
I got my own plane. It's perfectly fine.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess the thing with managed services is that the vendors already incurred all of those capital costs. It's not going to be cheaper for you to bring your own parachute. It's actually going to be a lot more risky because, here you're jumping with an expert, and that expert is trained on all of that equipment. And, you giving them your piece of equipment just means that they're probably going to be fumbling around while they're on the clock, which is either going to give you higher cost or worse outcomes, or both.
Yeah.
So I guess it's really about, trusting with a managed service provider that you're going to enjoy the ride and have fun.
Yeah. That's a great illustration there. A good analogy, because you show up with your own parachute, they're probably not even gonna let you jump because they don't know that you know how to pack a parachute and inspect it and all that stuff, and they can't let you jump out of their plane with that much risk. So you just have to trust the tools that they have.
Yeah. And you focus on the things that maybe you're responsible for in that, if you're trying to pilot the plane as well as do the jump, it's something might go wrong. I mean, so as the jumper, you have your part to, not pee your pants. I mean, I guess that's the focus on your data part of the analogy. But so again, my name's Ian MacRae. If you've enjoyed this, feel free to reach out to me. My direct number is here on the screen, 540-217-6261. Shoot me an email. Connect with Blake or I on social media. We're both on LinkedIn. We'd love to help you out, and it's not nearly as scary as jumping out of a plane.
More fun than that. And I'll be putting in in the video description, we'll have some links to some articles with more information about costs of IT, also building versus buying. I'll be covering a lot of these points in a written format if you're more into that. So check those out too.
Excellent. Well, thanks a lot for putting this together, Blake. This has been fun.
As always.